Introducing you to people across North Carolina and around the world who put their Catholic faith into action. This is FaithWorks on Catholic 540 AM Divine Mercy Radio. Now, here's your host for FaithWorks, Ellen White.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of FaithWorks on Divine Mercy Radio. Our show highlights individuals through God's grace who put their faith into action daily. Amazing people who have an interesting, sometimes overlooked, impact on our Catholic faith. On FaithWorks, we share their stories. I'm your host, Ellen White. Today, we're talking about the remarkable witness of Michelle Duppong. Michelle was a missionary with the Fellowship of Catholic University Students, or FOCUS, whose joyful faith and love for others impacted many lives. After being diagnosed with cancer at 31, she continued to live with extraordinary trust in God, inspiring those around her through her suffering. Her story is told in the book, Michelle Duppong, Hope in the Depths of Suffering, by Catholic author Patti Armstrong, who joins us today. Patti Maguire Armstrong is an award-winning journalist, managing editor, and co-author of the best-selling Amazing Grace series. She's also written Dear God, I Don't Get It, What Would Monica Do, and Holy Hacks. A former social worker and public administrator, Patti now writes full-time from North Dakota, where she and her husband, Mark, raised their 10 children. Welcome to Divine Mercy Radio, Patti. It's so good to have you.
Oh, thank you. What an honor to be on.
And you said before we started that you also are on the TV end of things. What are you doing with that?
I have a TV. It's been over 5 years. I have a TV talk show on, it's called Ladies of Another View.
Ladies of Another. That's awesome.
So it's like, it really has a wide reach, including everywhere on the internet at Back TV Plus. So, and it's a secular show. And at first I thought, oh my gosh, why would I do this? And I was kind of dragging my feet, but then I realized the beauty of bringing my Catholic faith onto this show. Now we don't go full on Catholic, rosary and all that, but I've had an exorcist on, I've had a number of priests on different topics that I think relate to the greater society. So it really has been a lot of fun and in a way to get beyond just preaching to the choir, which I like to do too.
Yes.
Because then we all speak the same language, and I do write for the National Catholic Register, so I can, just totally engage in my Catholic faith there.
I'm very interested in this, Ladies of Another View, Patti. So we need to have you on another time and talk about this and your experience with it. Let's talk about this in the future. I'd really like to talk. I love this idea of going out beyond, preaching to the choir and talking to those, which we're called to do. So
right, and it wasn't from me. I didn't want to do it. It was an energy that just swept me up.
Yep.
And I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this.
Yep.
And then I realized, wait a minute, like God is putting this in front of me, and like you say, wear my big old silver crucifix every day. So. Everybody knows I'm Catholic. And we do have many different denominations. So it's a good opportunity.
Yes, for sure. Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about what we have you on for this, actually. As you research the life of Michelle Duppong while writing this book, Michelle Duppong, Hope in the Depths of Suffering, what stood out most about who she was as a person, Patti?
One thing that people kept saying, people who didn't even know each other but knew Michelle would say she was extraordinarily ordinary. That in her ordinariness, you just loved her, you had fun with her, but you knew she was special at the same time. But she wasn't, it's towards the end of the book where I included that a priest was talking to some students at South Dakota. And he said, do you believe you can become a saint? And one of the students said, I knew Michelle Duppong, and so yes, I know we can all become saints because I knew Michelle. And she was just a fun person, but you didn't ever question that she wasn't in love with her Catholic faith and in love with Jesus. But you could still relate to her. regardless of where you were at on your own faith journey. She didn't just hang around with very religious people, but she sure wanted, and so, I mean, really, that was Michelle. There's, her brother Jeff was talking about when she came to visit in Fargo when she was a Focus missionary and stopped off, and they went to this dive bar because it was one of her favorite Irish bands were playing there, and how much fun they have. So, she wasn't just kneeling in church praying all the time, but she was out in the world, loving people and having fun with them.
And you mentioned ordinary, and I just saw a quote by G.K. Chesterton yesterday, Patti, that talked about the extraordinary family is, and I'm paraphrasing here, an ordinary man and an ordinary woman with ordinary children. So, I mean, why do you think authentic holiness often looks so ordinary?
Because if we read the lives of the saints, now see, it depends on where you are in your faith journey.
Right.
If you read about St. Padre Pio and St. Therese and St. Faustina, you're reading about, even though St. Therese was, the little flower, and people said, well, what's special about her? What are we even going to say? But by reading her diary, you know how deeply spiritual she was. And it with Michelle, and I think we're reading that about a lot of the saints, especially whose causes are being opened now, a lot of the young people, like St. Carlos Acutis, how he just fit in. He wasn't set apart in a way that he didn't fit in with others, that you felt like you don't belong here, or I'm not comfortable around you, or boy, you're way beyond me. So that ordinariness that makes them feel, okay, if they can do this, I can do it too. Not that they were engaging in activity that isn't becoming of a saint. So you knew you had to up your game a bit, but you didn't feel uncomfortable around them.
Yeah, that's an important distinction, and just helping to rise the bar a little bit with those that we encounter. Yeah, that's a really good point. So let's talk about Michelle's formation and mission. During college, she became deeply involved in Bible study and discipleship through Focus, Fellowship of Catholic University Students. How did that experience shape her sense of mission, do you think?
Almost from the beginning when she was a child, she really took to the Catholic faith in a way that her 5 siblings were also raised Catholic, and they all are very, very good Catholics to this day. But with her, it was, she was all in. She would want to say that rosary. The family said a rosary every night, and she'd say, Mom, we haven't said our rosary yet. She was, it was foremost in her mind. And so when one of her siblings also went to North Dakota State University, NDSU, where she was there helping them sign up and saying, you don't want to have any class after 4 because there's Mass at the Newman Center. And one of her sisters, I quoted her in the book, Kayleen, said, well, she wasn't necessarily planning on doing that, but she thought, but here her big sister was. And she's like, well, I guess I don't have anything else I'm doing then. I guess I'll do that. But she drew them in so that their faith grew as a result, just from being at the Newman Center, being around a lot of other young people. Now, Focus came, I think she was a junior, I'm pretty sure she was a junior, when Focus came to the campus. And Michelle wasn't real crazy about that. She likes the way things were at the Newman Center. And now the Focus missionaries were taking over the Bible study. So she wasn't all in and excited about it because she liked the way things were. But little by little, being a woman of faith and enthusiasm and, just being open to relationships with others, she did grow to love the Focus Bible study and the missionaries. And so at the end of her junior year, she herself had applied to become a missionary. And, I guess it would have been her senior year. And initially she didn't get accepted, if you can believe that. And I know you saw the movie, Focus had a documentary made, movie of her life, and they share that in the movie too, as well as in the book, that she got overlooked. And the Father Cheney, the chaplain of the Newman Center, talked to somebody over at Focus and said, I think you're making a big mistake, because he knew her. He knew her enthusiasm and her zest. And that missionary spirit, she was always inviting people. Her cousin, who was a rodeo guy and wasn't, what didn't feel, a lot of times he'd be out, going to parties, and she would just say, just kind of shake her head and smile, that knowing that she was living a different life. But he goes, I never felt judged by her. She'd say, hey, we're having a spaghetti feed at the Newman Center. Why don't you come before you go out? She would invite people to Mass. She was always inviting people. Now, here is a very interesting thing. She really said she didn't have a personal relationship with Jesus until college or after college, when somebody, her spiritual director, she was sharing her day, and he said, well, did you tell Jesus all this? Well, no, she prayed to Jesus, but she wasn't necessarily having this personal relationship where, an ongoing sharing. And that changed everything for her, where it wasn't just, you're God, I'm praying to you. Now it's, you're God, you're Jesus, you're my brother and my God, and I have a relationship with you. This is a personal God. So it's interesting, even though she was formed in the Catholic faith, it wasn't until years of practicing it that she took that step of having a personal relationship with Jesus.
Were there any people, Patti, through her experience at the Newman Center and then subsequently through joining Focus, that had a direct impact on her? Did she have a spiritual director, a priest, or something at the school that helped to kind of develop, I guess, this relationship with Christ and this ongoing sharing that you mentioned?
I would say with Father Cheney, and
okay.
I don't know the name of the Focus missionaries also, because they understood that creating friendships and leading people through friendships in their faith. And so she already was doing that sort of thing. So that just took her to the next level. And then the formation that she had with Focus, who she was with for 6 years at 3 different colleges. And then when she felt ready to leave, and she contacted our bishop, Bishop David Kagan of the Bismarck Diocese, who is the bishop who opened up her cause, he offered her a position as the director of adult faith formation for the Bismarck Diocese. And then everything she had really learned and experienced with accompanying people with their faith, she took it out to the Catholics in the Bismarck Diocese, including the priests, because she began reaching out to the smaller dioceses, because we have a lot of small towns. And she felt they needed to be brought in, and they needed to be accompanied also. And some of them invited her to come out and do missions. And so when she died, I forget if there were 32 or 36, it was like 30-some priests said her funeral mass, because she had developed all these relationships with priests, and she helped them in their walk with faith, just as they helped her. As a matter of fact, Father Ross Kovash, who's now the pastor of Ascension Press in Bismarck, and he was out in a small town then, and he developed a friendship with Michelle and had her come out and do a mission. And she's the one that pointed out to him, do you know how many people fall away after they join the church, after they go through the OCIA, and then it was called RCIA program? How many are still Catholic after a year? And I don't remember the exact percent, but it's like less than half. And he was horrified, like, what? And so, through Michelle's influence, he realized we need to develop a personal relationship with them, and them developing that relationship with their faith and with God, so they don't just go through the motions and then fall away. And so that was a life-lasting encounter that he had with her, and that changed the way he did things.
I like, it's about first developing our relationship with the Lord, having this ongoing sharing and conversation with him, and how with her own witness, it started with that. And then she took that relationship out to the people that she encountered and recognized the importance of, friendships, not only with, the lay people in her circles, but going beyond that, and especially with the priests and how that helps. And it's such an important reminder for us, number one, to be praying for our priests because they're doing so much, but also to develop those relationships with them, to let them know that we have their back. I think it's so important. Now, and you talked about the large numbers of folks leaving after just a year. And Michelle often talked about seeing sadness and even despair with many young people. What was it about those experiences that stirred such a strong missionary heart in her, do you think?
When she was on different campuses, and a lot of times she referred to a talk that was given. And at the end of each chapter is the actual words of Michelle, either her writing, her articles, or the words from her podcast. And this particular story was shared it was either one of her talks or a podcast where they were talking about basically safe sex type of talk. And she thought, why aren't they reaching higher? Why is there this assumption that everybody's going to be having sex? And so she, at different times, like when she was on the dorm government and at NDSU, and they were planning an event before Easter. And so here you are, college dorm. Not everybody is a faithful Catholic like Michelle, all different faiths. And they were looking for ideas. And somebody said, hey, why don't we have an Easter egg hunt? And we put condoms in the Easter eggs. And then the dorm president said, okay, let's take a vote. And a few people kind of mumbled. And this was a friend of hers who had tagged along to the meeting that related this story to me. And she said, there were a few mumbled, yes, A's, yeah, we vote in favor. And she says, okay, and against? And loud and clear, Michelle said, no. And so the president said, okay, the noes have it. And then she moved on to the next order of business. And her friend said, Michelle believed the power of one. And in that particular situation, she was such a fierce force for righteousness and good that nobody wanted to argue with her. And she talks about, it's a hard sell. It's a hard sell to be chased on college campuses because everyone assumes just the opposite, that it's taken for granted that you're going to be sleeping around. And their idea of a talk is, well, don't completely sleep around and make sure you're giving your agreement. And she's saying, no, we can do better. Mm-hmm. And she felt bad for these young people who didn't know what better looked like. In that turning to God and following him in all things, even through the difficulties, like with her last year of life where she was fighting cancer, that he was going to lift you up and enter into your journey with you. Mm-hmm. And give you that strength and give you that courage, and that it was such a better way of life. But like I said, you didn't feel judged by her. And one of her, somebody who worked for the diocese with her, Abby, was walking with her to her apartment, which was within walking distance of the office. And she said, Michelle loved whoever was in front of her. And she said there was somebody who lived in her apartment. And she said, hey, how are you doing? She was checking. She goes, I got to check in on her just a minute. And you could tell that she was going through some hard times. And Michelle reached out to her and she said, well, I'm here if you need me. Mm. And she said, wherever you were at, Michelle met you there. So she didn't just, reach out to the people who were like her at the Newman Center or fellow Focus missionaries. She knew she was going into the big wide world, mm-hmm. where people were on all levels of faith and no faith. But she, in some of her writing, she said, I don't just want to be a saint, I want to be a great saint. Mm. And so she wanted to give her all. But through the people that knew her and encountered her, you knew she didn't just want to be a saint. She wanted you to be a saint too. Mm. She wasn't going alone. She wanted to bring everybody that she could with her.
Oh, it's so great. And I love that you mentioned that she loved whoever was in front of her. And a regular prayer of mine is to be present throughout the day and to be open to whoever the Lord has crossed my path. I think it's so important that, God is large and in charge, and there are no coincidences with him. Our eyes just need to be open. And she certainly lived that, Michelle Duppong. All right. I want to talk about her perseverance is incredible. And we talked about how she was initially turned down for the missionary position. Tell me about her response to that disappointment and what it revealed about her character, Patti.
Her response was never to complain. Her response was immediately to figure out a backup. Okay, well, what am I going to do? She didn't let it crush her that she had her hopes hopes up high for doing this. And she grew up in the country on a farm. Mm-hmm. And she asked her parents, hey, can I move home and work on the farm while I'm figuring out where I'm going to work? And she already had started while she was there at home. She already was going to be working at the youth group in her nearby church. She already got herself busy and engaged in serving the Lord while she decided she had a degree in horticulture because she loved the land. She loved the country. She loved her home. And at her home, just in the shadow of her farm, is a cemetery that was used by the homesteaders there, some of her ancestors. And that is where she's buried. So it's a beautiful story where her parents still live and where pilgrims come to visit her grave. And not that so on the topic of perseverance, she just did the next thing. She didn't have to just fall apart and, oh, well, me, they don't like me. And the reason is, and it's the same reason that why she was able to persevere in her faith through cancer, is because she trusted God. And that if this is your will, then she wasn't going to argue with it. Your will be done, Lord. Your will be done in my life. And if this isn't what you want from me, then it's not what I want either. All she wanted to know is, what do you want, God? And help lead the way. And he did. And he does for all of us, we, like you mentioned, Ellen, your prayer you just want to be present and open to what God has for you. And if we ask him that, I don't know anybody who doesn't feel that, oh my gosh, he answers it in spades, that he surprises us all the time. I love that you say he's large and in charge. And I have a friend who says, oh, God is so clever. And we laugh at that because clever is such a small word for what he does and what he is. But in human terms, he does things that we never could imagine. And Michelle trusted in that and experienced it all the time. And so lo and behold, they ended up calling her and saying, we do want you to be a focus missionary. I think she was on the wait list, and it turned out that she reached the top of the list, and they said, yes, we would like you to be a focus missionary. And then oh my gosh, not only did she get turned down, and they're like, okay, I guess maybe we should take a second look and we should invite her to be a missionary. Focus made a movie about her.
I know, that sounds so ironic.
Who has a movie made of their life? Especially somebody who originally got turned down by them.
Right.
But she flourished, and she became an inspiration to Focus, the entire organization, through her humility.
Yes, through her humility, which is key. And I love, if it's not your will, Lord, it's not my will either. All right, if you're just tuning in, this is Ellen White with FaithWorks on Divine Mercy Radio. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Patti Armstrong as we talk about her book, Michelle Duppong, Hope in the Depths of Suffering, and the inspiring story, of Michelle Duppong, a young woman whose joy, faith, and love for others continues to touch lives, myself included. We are grateful for our show's sponsor, Thales College. Okay, I want to talk about her illness and the incredible witness that she gave through that, and some of the testimony of the healthcare providers that were at her side are just incredible and bring tears to your eyes. When Michelle was diagnosed with cancer, Patti, many people expected fear or bitterness, but that wasn't what they saw. What was distinctive about the way she faced her illness?
Well, she had a pain in her abdomen that was getting worse. And she had been told by her doctor, probably benign cysts. They'd done an MRI. One's bigger than the other, but a lot of times they just resolve themselves. But the pain was getting worse and worse. And they said, okay, we're going to have those removed. So they planned an outpatient surgery, fairly simple. And what they found was cancer riddled throughout her abdomen, stage 4. They sewed her up, and she learned she had stage 4 cancer, and they gave her 2 months to live. Now, her sister Renee, who had a degree in nursing and was in between jobs and felt called to accompany her on this journey and to be at her side, which was, my goodness, I mean, when you read about everything she went through, you know, that to have her sister Renee at her side was so beautiful in so many different ways, spiritually, physically, emotionally. And Renee said in that year of her cancer journey, she cried maybe 5 times, and this wasn't one of those times. And she said she almost wondered if maybe she knew. When Renee said, Michelle, they found cancer, she put her head down and maybe was talking to God at that moment, but she didn't cry. And Renee said, I almost wonder if she already wondered if maybe it could be cancer, even though they were telling her, okay, we're just going to remove these cysts, and it's not going to be a big deal. And another very, very difficult time for her was when they fought the cancer. She was treated by the Cancer Treatment Center of America. She had gone also to the Mayo Clinic and into the local doctors, but was accepted by the Cancer Treatment Center. And it was outside of Chicago and went there many times. And at one point when they were doing the surgery to remove everything they could, they said, well, you know, we're going to have to remove, very likely we're going to have to remove everything, your ovaries, your uterus. No, I think they thought, if we can save your uterus, do you want us to collect your eggs so maybe you can become a mother someday? I guess even if they removed the uterus then through IV, you know, through surrogate or whatever. And she said, no, I'm Catholic, I can't do that. But it was one of her deepest sadnesses to think she would have to let go of her motherhood, because she always wanted, she had a serious boyfriend, they talked about marriage, and she always wanted to be a mother. But she wasn't ever going to compromise on her Catholic faith, even if it meant suffering. And that was a very, very difficult moment for her. But she was an example. She never complained. She never felt sorry for herself. And even through all this, she was always present to everybody else, even at times when a nurse's mistake caused intense suffering by a huge mistake. And she was consoling the nurse. Don't feel bad. We're all human. Everybody makes mistakes.
And she was really attentive to everybody that was there with her. I remember at one point in her story, I guess her physician in the hospital had, you know, just given her some pretty serious news. I don't know if it was the actual I don't think it was the actual diagnosis, but there was something. Oh, it was towards the end, and she put her head down and then looked up and asked him how he was doing, and it was that moment that just touched him so deeply that he had to leave the room.
Right.
And it's countless stories like this.
Yeah, Dr. Leo Tagberg, and he was the intensive care doctor. And when Michelle was under his care, he said, I already knew who she was before I met her in person, because everybody knew Michelle, he said. And he said, and when she was away, everybody wanted to know, how is Michelle doing? And you think, and he said, you know, I'm treating people who have cancer, who are in a lot of pain. I don't expect them to be happy and in a good mood. But Michelle was different. She always wanted to know. And he said, and when she said, how are you? She meant it, because the next time you talked with her, she would remember what you had talked about and ask about it. So she meant it. And when you said how she impacted so many of the people in the medical community taking care of her, it went beyond that. It went to patients. It went to the janitor. It went to everybody. So much so that in the end, when she was able to leave to go home for hospice, that in itself was an act of God. They didn't think they were going to even get her to be able to stand up and be able to get her on a plane. Dr. Cheney, who I mentioned, was the chaplain at the Newman Center, knew all the Duppongs, all the siblings went through the Newman Center, and he had given retreats out at their farm. And he was also a pilot. So he had flown her in a small plane to the Mayo Clinic, but now out to Chicago, he was able to get use of a larger plane to fly her family, her sister and her parents and her home. But they had to get her to be able to stand up. And that's a scene in the movie, the Radiating Joy, that movie that you can go to the Focus website and watch it for free. And that was that moment where her mother, Marianne, Father Taberg, Dr. Taberg, and that's the priest that been talking about, said, Michelle, can you dance? Can you get up and have a dance with your father? And so he held Michelle in his arms, and Marianne put on a John Denver song. And Dr. Taberg pulled out his phone and recorded it, the two dancing to the music, and he said, okay, she can get on the plane. And so then, I don't know if it was the very next day, when they realized, okay, Michelle's going home, and she won't be coming back this time, it took 4 hours for everybody to come and say goodbye to her. 4 hours, from patients to janitors to, CNAs, to doctors, to nurses. Everybody knew Michelle and wanted to say goodbye to her.
It is such an incredibly powerful and encouraging story. And what an incredible witness Michelle continues to give us. All right. So, and I want to, you briefly mentioned about your little sections in the book in Michelle's words, and these are great for reflection. She talks about evangelization and living virtue in today's culture. And I think priceless. And I'm so glad you put that in the book. But in the final chapters, Patti, you explore the Catholic understanding of suffering and drawing especially on the teachings of Pope John Paul the Great. How did Michelle's life help make that teaching on redemptive suffering real and tangible for us?
Because she never stopped praying for healing. Some people who've read about saints may have heard about victim souls. And these are saints that even wanted to, sometimes the suffering, they've asked for the suffering, they wanted to be a victim soul for the church. Michelle was asking to be healed. She wanted to get better, but her will always was God's will. And so if God wanted her to continue to have cancer, if God decided that she wasn't ever going to get better, she accepted that. So we go into an explanation of redemptive suffering. And what is that? What is the redemptive suffering, so that we are offering it up and we're not letting it go to waste. And she would, even with some of her more painful procedures, she had a sister that came in and visited, and she came back from one of the procedures, and she explained, I just offered that up for so-and-so. It was a politician that was pro-abortion, and you think, she cared about those people, the people that maybe make our skin crawl or her seem awful. She was offering up her suffering for them, because she wasn't letting any of it go to waste. So we kind of explain in that chapter, and Stephanie Parks, who had been a Focus missionary, she wrote the chapter on when Michelle was a Focus missionary. So she wrote that chapter, and then she and I together worked on the redemptive suffering chapter, because she was getting her master's in theology. And we talked about that there is the passive will of God, where it's not his will that people sin. It isn't his will that there's suffering in the world, but he allows it. He allows it for a greater good, and in union with Christ and the suffering of Christ, that it has great power. And I interviewed her spiritual director while she was that last year when she worked for the diocese, Monsignor Thomas Richter, and he explained, that Jesus didn't save us through his miracles. He didn't save us through his, his preaching in his 3 years on earth. He saved us through his passion and death on the cross. He saved us through his suffering, and how powerful that is when we join our suffering to his, and so that it doesn't get wasted. And I quoted that a priest that I heard once say, suffering without offering up just hurts, but suffering when you offer it up is supernaturally powerful, and we can put it into practice. And nobody wants, Michelle didn't choose to get cancer and suffer and die, but she accepted it. And in the foreword, Monsignor James Shea, who's the president of the University of Mary, and his mom is friends with Mary Ann and Ken. His parents are friends with them, Michelle's parents, and they're from different small towns. Not necessarily close to each other, about an hour apart, but they knew of one another, and that's where Michelle did her last year as a focus missionary. And Monsignor Shea said, now, why would God have permitted this? Here Michelle was doing such good work, making an impact in the world. What sense does it make for her to suffer and die of cancer? And he said, to bring a greater good. And Michelle understood that if he was allowing it, and we can look and see how many people knew Michelle when she was alive. A lot. Like when she was suffering and fighting cancer, word spread, people were praying for her. There was over 200,000 people following her caring bridge site. And yet, now even more people know her because she's known all over. There's a movie, there's a book, that word is spread. People are praying for her intercession. And in the movie, Bishop Kagan mentioned a particular story where it sure seems like a miracle that this cancer was gone after praying for Michelle's intercession.
There's so many things that we can focus on here, Patti. Yes, and how the Lord used this opportunity to bring about a greater good. And I always come back to the scripture verse because it seems like everything that we experience, this just encapsulates it. Romans 8:28, all things work for good for those that love the Lord and live according to his purposes. But, and also, with this cancer that has gone away, might be the first miracle. Just the fact that this story of Michelle has spread throughout the church so quickly and touched so many different people. I mean, that's the Lord's work. There's no other way that we can explain it. All right, it was Michelle's greatest wish to bring people to Christ, and she's doing it in such a massive scale, not just in the United States, but really around the world. There are so many people that were following her story, or people that she met at pilgrimages, and priests that she knew in Ireland, that she is touching even more lives in death than she did when she was still alive. And that is one of the things that is looked at when you open a cause for canonization, is that before the cause was opened she died in 2015, and the cause was opened 3 years ago. And that instead of, her fading away, she became more and more known, and the family and the diocese were getting cards and letters from people talking about how Michelle had impacted her life. And Bishop Kagan said, and I included this interview in the book, where he said there was one common factor of all the people that were writing, whether they felt that their prayer was being answered according to, their will, they're asking to be healed, whether they felt that prayer was answered or not, they all had the same acceptance of whatever God's will. They were at peace and ready to accept whatever God's will was for them. And Bishop Kagan said that was Michelle. That was what she did. And then to see these people coming to that same understanding and acceptance that she did, he really felt that, this is the sort of thing that leads to opening a cause for canonization, that impact they have even in death, that they're still drawing people to Christ. Gosh, okay. And it was just opened 3 years ago. This is so crazy. Again, if it's your will, it's my will too, Lord. Okay. And Wow. For listeners who want to dive deeper into Michelle's story, Patti, where's the best place for them to purchase this book? And if they want to follow your work directly, where should they go? What would you say?
Well, so Sophia Institute Press is the publisher, and you can go right there and order the book. You can ask your local bookstore because it should be available, or it can be available in any bookstore. And a lot of times people don't realize, even if your bookstore isn't carrying it, they can get it, they can order it, or but it very likely is at your local Catholic bookstore. And I write for the National Catholic Register. It's Patti Maguire Armstrong, and I do have a blog. I might change places, I always, but if you want to connect with me, a lot of my articles, both at the National Catholic Register and PattiMaguireArmstrong.com.
Okay, PattiMaguireArmstrong.com. And, if someone is listening today, Patti, that's going through suffering, illness, or discouragement, what do you think Michelle's life would want them to know, or Michelle, just through her intercession would want to share with them?
She would say, talk with Jesus and tell him. While she was dying, she had an aunt, Jean, that was dying in the embrace, and I have that scene in the book. And she told her aunt, and her aunt was a very, very holy woman too, and I knew her too, Jean. She said, sometimes I don't feel him. And Michelle said, I know, but just tell him. He wants to, he wants to hear how you feel. And that's what she would say to everybody. Just tell him. Just tell him and talk to him, even during the struggles, even when you're having a hard time accepting God's will. Just tell him.
Yeah, he wants to know. He's right there with you. He wants to have that relationship with you. All right. And, we said servant of God, Michelle Duppong, Patti. When did people first begin speaking about her life in terms of holiness?
Well, I went to her funeral. I really was a part of this, having known her parents. I went to her funeral. I was praying for her. I went to her funeral, and Mary Ann told me, well, when I went to her funeral, somebody said the bishop's going to wait 5 years, and then he's thinking of opening her cause of for canonization. And when I interviewed him, I said, am I imagining, was that a thing? Was that just people talking? And he goes, no. Even then, he knew how special she was. She put on a thirst conference against a lot of people. It was a big Eucharistic Congress when her first year. And some people are like, okay, we just celebrated this on Centennial. It's a lot of work. And maybe she's naive. She thinks we're going to. Well, there were 7,000 to 8,000 people that came to that, and they came from out of state. So Michelle was special in working for the Lord and trusting him and doing great things while being a humble servant all along and loving people where they're at. So I said, you really were thinking about it? He said, yes. And he had asked her spiritual director, what do you think of this? And he goes, I think it would be a good idea. And so it turned out instead of 5 years, it was 7 years. He said with COVID, things were delayed a bit, but then he went ahead and he opened it on All Saints Day 3 years ago. So even then, and so Mary Ann was at the funeral, and she said she was standing behind people who didn't even know who she was, but she overheard two people talking, and somebody said, I feel like I've known a saint. So she was just a regular person, but she was extraordinary and something you felt the life of Christ within her if you knew her.
Okay. Again, if you want, you can go to PattiMaguireArmstrong.com to be connected to Patti, or you can purchase the book through Sophia Institute Press. Again, the title of the book is Michelle Duppong, Hope in the Depths of Suffering. It is fantastic. And you know what? There's still some time in Lent. We can pick it up and have it be a part of our reflection now or even on into the year. It is such a fantastic book. Thank you so much, Patti, for sharing Michelle's story. Gosh.
Thank you for all your enthusiasm. And it was so nice talking with you.
My prayer really is that this book will get in the hands of many. And again, our guest today has been Patti Armstrong, author of Michelle Duppong, Life in the Depths of Suffering, sharing the inspiring story of Michelle Duppong. I highly recommend that you pick up your own copy of the book, as it says on the back cover, and I love this. Read the book to meet a young woman whose joy was contagious, whose love was costly, and whose sanctity is credible. Then share it with a friend who suffers, a student searching, or a parish hungry for hope. Michelle Duppong may be the saint you've been praying God would send. If you missed any part of this episode of FaithWorks or want to catch up on past conversations filled with inspiration and hope, you can find them all at divinemercyradio.org. Just click on local shows, and don't forget, you can take FaithWorks with you wherever you go. Just download the free Divine Mercy Radio app from your app store. Simply search Divine Mercy Radio NC, and you're all set to listen anytime, anywhere. God bless.